Hi everybody, it's Chris here and a big welcome to the Excel VBA Absolute Beginner course, the 2-hour Excel VBA Absolute Beginner course. Now, if you're watching on replay, I'm going to say hello to a few people right at the beginning of the stream. So just skip forward 2 or 3 minutes and you'll be able to get to the beginning of the learning content. But what's it all about, this 2-hour course? Well, I aim to equip you with just the basic skills in Excel VBA. Yes, we can't be experts in 2 hours, but it's my aim to kind of light a fire. That's a good phrase, isn't it? Light a fire within you just to help you appreciate what the possibilities of Excel VBA are, and crucially equip you with what I call the Excel meta skills, which are the skills that make everything easier, that are going to allow you to excel. There you go. That are going to allow you to excel with Excel VBA. But excuse me. If you're watching live, a big welcome. And let's say hello to some people. Andy is live. Big welcome to Andy. How are you doing? Where are you watching from, Andy? I'm based here in Nottingham, in the UK. It's a beautiful day outside. I've got a little office in the bottom of the garden here. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you all live. So stick a message for me in the chat. And without further ado, let's get started with our 2-hour, excuse me, Excel VBA Absolute Beginner course. Okay, I've got a few slides to go through first. So firstly, what are we going to cover? What are we going to cover on the Excel VBA Absolute Beginner course? Firstly, we're going to get set up for VBA success. Yes, we're going to go from absolute beginner level, which means literally from opening up Excel. Yes, in a second, excuse me. I hope my voice is going to get better. We've got an hour of doing this. In a second, I'm going to go ahead and open up Excel, and you'll see what you've got to do to get Excel set up, including stuff like saving to the right file format, the developer tab, and the screen setup. Excuse me. Then we're going to go ahead and actually write a macro. Yeah, we're going to get straight into it. Your first macro, we're going to do that. You're going to be doing Excel VBA programming. Then we're going to learn about different sources of code. Where does source come from? The truth is, most code isn't organically written. A lot of code is actually recorded using the macro recorder. It's a great learning tool. It's one of our Excel VBA meta skills. We'll do that next. Then we'll learn about debugging. Debugging is our main Excel meta skill. More about those in a second. We've just got to learn how to debug. If you can debug, you can really do anything. The sky's the limit for your Excel VBA learning. Then we'll get into the main techniques, interacting with cells, variables, loops, conditional statements. We're going to talk about the meta skills too. Excuse me, my voice is going, but we'll see how we get on. We'll talk about the meta skills. Now, why the meta skills important? It's important because you're going to be stuck. Yep, we've all been stuck with Excel, but it's going to get even worse with Excel VBA. So knowing what to do when you don't know what to do is important. You know, you've kind of hit a wall, don't know where to go. What should you do in that situation? Well, this is where the meta skills come into play. They're things that we can do that make everything else easier. That's why they're meta, because they're above everything else. So what are the meta skills? Firstly, debugging. Debugging in Excel, annotating code, and commenting code properly, knowing where to go for help. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Members Monday community today, which is one place, but you can go online for help. Translation. What are the techniques and how do they translate into real world applications? And then importantly, never giving up and loving those punch the air moments. Yes, we're going to try to find some of those punch the air moments today. Okay, who's with us? Big welcome to Barry, tuning in from Nashville in the USA. Good to have you with us. Andy says, are the contents pretty much covered in 30 for 30? Pretty much, but we're taking a different approach, Andy. You'll see we're going to take a different approach in these 2 hours. A big welcome to Liju. Liju is with us tuning in. I'm just going to grab some water, hoping that's going to fix my voice. Okay, so with that said, let's get started. So first thing we're going to do is actually open up Excel. Now, one thing I'm going to do here is just stop this ticker for a second. And then I'm just going to go to my taskbar at the bottom here. I have the Excel icon here. So you've got to find the Excel icon. You might have to go and search in Windows to find it, or it might be there on your desktop already. We're just going to click Excel. So we just open up Excel Nothing special. Excuse me. I have a frog in my throat. Okay, hoping that's going to get better. So we're going to open up a blank workbook here. So hopefully we're familiar with this. We're familiar with Excel, but what do we need to do to start coding? There's a couple of things we need to do and we need to be aware of. Firstly, can you see here, we've got the developer tab, How do you view the developer tab? The developer tab is important because it allows us to access where code lives, which is in the VBA editor. Big welcome to G channel. Big welcome. I've got a really bad cough today, guys. Don't know where this has come from. I'm going to do my best, but apologies. And maybe I won't speak so much. I'll just do this on the screen. We'll see how we go. So developer tab. Want to see the developer tab? How do we see it? We go to File and then More down here. On my system, it says More down here. Double click and then go to Options. And now there's a couple of things. Excuse me. A couple of things we need to bear in mind in Options. The first thing is we're going to customize the ribbon. This customized ribbon option allows us to view the VBA editor, particularly the developer tab. So you're going to go in here. You're going to make sure you can see developer here. And then we're going to tick this little box. That's going to allow you to view the developer tab. So make sure you can do that first. Excuse me. Now you may have to close and open, restart Excel at this point to make sure you can see the developer tab. So hopefully you can see it. Let's just go ahead and familiarize ourselves quickly with it. Excuse me. And don't worry, you don't need to know everything on the developer tab. You only need to know a couple of things, particularly the Visual Basic Editor. We're going to look at that in a second. We're going to look at recording a macro today, hopefully as well. And then this button here is useful for inserting buttons too. So just a couple of things to be aware of to begin with. So we've got the developer tab open. We can access the Visual Basic Editor here. Don't go in there yet. We're going to save that a little bit longer. Big welcome to Gadebo, who's tuning in here. How are you doing? Apologies for the pronunciation of your name there. A couple more things in Excel options before we get started. Firstly, I've got to think about the file format. Now, I'm going to hit F12 here on the Windows PC. And this is our usual save dialog box. Now, what happens if you just save as Excel workbook here? That's going to be problematic when we're using VBA because we need to save as an Excel macro-enabled workbook. Excuse me. Now, if we don't do that, if we don't save as a macro-enabled workbook, it is going to be a bit of a disaster because we're going to lose all of our Excel VBA code. I've done that many times, and particularly when I was getting started with Excel VBA. So you've either got to remember to save as a macro-enabled workbook. I'm going to go ahead and just save this as 2-hour VBA, part 1. You can see it saving as macro-enabled workbook here. So I can go ahead and hit save there. But even better, you can change your default save option. Excuse me. You can change your default save option to macro-enabled workbook. Oh, damn, I might have to take a break in a second, guys. Not sure what's up with my voice, but really sorry. I'm going to soldier on, okay? We'll see where we get to. I might have to take a break in a second. So we're going to go to More, going to go to Options again, and then we're going to go to Save. Going to go to Save here, and we want to be aware of what are we saving, what format are we saving our files in? What format are we saving our files in? Excel workbook. It says here, well, let's change that to Excel macro-enabled workbook. What that's going to do is whenever you save your Excel file, it's going to automatically save as a macro-enabled workbook. That's going to avoid that disastrous situation where we just lose all of our code, which can happen. So we hit OK now. And now, once again, you might have to restart Excel, but if you hit the F12 key, you can see automatically we're going to Excel macro-enabled workbook. So I really recommend doing those things before you do anything else. Excuse me. Right, so with that said, big welcome to people tuning in. Big welcome to Tuku. Welcome to you. How are you doing? Colin, tuning in from Yateley down in Hampshire. I bet it is nice weather down there. Colin, how are you doing? Pramod tuning in as well. How are you? And Anup, I remember you from back in the day. And you're saying I've been a huge mentor. That's fantastic, Anup. But really, you have put the work in. If you're doing VBA code, you have to put the work in. So you owe the credit to yourself, really. So we're now ready to go to the place where Excel VBA code lives, which is in the Visual Basic editor. So you can go Developer, Visual Basic, or you can go Alt and F11. I'm here on the Windows PC. I can use the Windows shortcuts Alt and F11. And this is our workbench. You know, this is our gym. This is our office. This is the Excel VBA editor. Let's just take a second to get familiar here. And there's three main areas we need to be aware of. Firstly, this is what we call the Project Explorer. This shows us which workbooks are open. Now, I do recommend when you do an Excel VBA, certainly when you're learning, you have one workbook open, just a single workbook, because they will stack up here and it will get confusing. You probably won't have this. This gives me some additional functionality in Excel to do with analysis, so you don't have to worry about that. But just really take a note to observe, take a second to observe where our current workbook is. That's the name I used to save this workbook. We want our code to live in this workbook. We'll see how to do that in just a second. What else? What's this down here? Now, this is called the Properties window. The Properties window. Excel consists of objects. They're the stuff in Excel. Objects have properties. They're things about the objects, for example, the value in the cell that we might want to change. And then objects are organized into collections. So three foundational concepts for us to get started with there. Excel is organized into objects, which have properties, which live in collections. Now, some of the properties of objects are expressed down here. That's why it's called the Properties window. So if I go to Workbook, for example, I can see some information here about the workbook. Nothing particularly interesting for us at this point. But for example, you can see if there's a password on it, if the workbook has been saved. And if we go to the sheet, we can see some properties of the sheet here too. Things like the standard column width. So that's a property. It's something about the sheet that you might want to manipulate. It's a property. Okay, so we've got the Project Explorer. We've got the Properties window, and we've got over here our main coding window. And this is the third piece in the jigsaw, if you like. So if you go to View and Code, you're going to be able to view the coding window. If you ever get the situation, excuse me, if you ever get the situation, I'm going to bring myself back for a second. Ever get the situation where you just lose everything in Excel? Like it might look like this, for example. You're like, where have my windows gone? You just need to go back to View here, and particularly to View Code. That's going to allow you to view this stuff again. Okay, so that's the VBA editor. One more thing at this point, to be able to program efficiently, trying to find a breathing pattern here that stops me coughing, but to be able to program efficiently and to be able to do things like debugging easily, that's not the one. You need to be able to view the VBA editor and Excel at the same time. So ideally, welcome to Raquel, and thank you, Anup, for your advice here. Welcome to Liu as well. Good to have you with us. Ideally, you have multiple screens. Yeah, I've got 3 screens here. That really helps for Excel VBA, but it works fine. Works fine on one screen. I've got a 13-inch laptop that I take out with me, and sometimes I'm doing coding on a 13-inch laptop. So I've got good at displaying the window. So what I just did there, Windows key and right on the Windows PC, holding down the Windows key and going right, you can see that window automatically takes up half of the screen. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. Then we can go to Excel, Windows key and left, and you can see Excel and then escape, and you can see Excel is now taking up half the screen. So how about that? You can do that. You can do that manually, but using the Windows shortcuts allows us to do that quickly. So I can now go Windows and up again. That maximizes the view. Windows and left puts it back over on the left there. Okay. So only after that, after those, things like saving the file, getting the right setup in Excel, the options and stuff, only after all that can we actually get started with our code in Excel VBA. So without further ado, let's go ahead and actually do some coding. So this is our coding window. This is where code lives. We're going to get to know it a bit better in this session and the next session. The first phrase we're going to type in here is option explicit. This is not absolutely necessary. And people might be saying, well, Chris, option explicit isn't necessary. So, why do you recommend people do it? I recommend people do it because it's a good habit to get into. It's a good habit to get into. What does option explicit do? Well, the main thing it does, just briefly, it's going to check some of your syntax before you try to run a VBA routine. A VBA routine is just a small computer program. We're going to write one in just a second. Option explicit is going to check the key things, particularly variables, that can allow us to avoid problems later on. So you don't need it. I do recommend it. Option explicit. That gets the VBA editor working in a favorable way for us. Then we've got to go ahead and use some programming syntax. So we use this piece of syntax, sub. Now, sub stands for subroutine, which is a short computer program, VBA based, that lives in Excel and can allow you to change the world. It's pure magic. We're going to work towards that. So we say sub, and then we say into Excel, we've got this little computer program. We'd like to give it a name. We're going to create a short computer program and give it a name. Now, what could you name it? Well, you could name it anything you like. Your name. You could name it computer. You could name it summer, whatever you like. There's certain names you can't use. So there's certain words that Excel reserves for its own use. For example, cell. I'm not sure if cell works. Column, words that are idiosyncratic to Excel. It's best not to use those. Rather, we should use an informative name, what we call an informative name for a macro. Now, an informative name for a macro, and we use informative names for variables too, and other things in Excel. An informative name for a macro tells us what the macro does just by looking at the name of the macro. What we're going to do is show a message box. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in. So I've typed in show underscore message box. And you're saying, Chris, why the underscore? Well, we need the underscore because a VBA routine, the name of it has to be a single word. Has to be a single word, so we do need the underscore there. So show message box, I've given you a clue as to what this routine is actually going to do. So we've got a new routine, just a small computer program. We've got a name for it. Great stuff. Now we're ready to hit enter, and suddenly we've got some additional syntax appearing. It says end sub. That's interesting because we've started the subroutine here with sub, and then Excel automatically ends it for us. So what have we got? We've got a starting point for this routine and an ending point for this routine. We're ready to put some lines of code into this routine. Then we're going to have a VBA macro, a short computer program. What are we going to do? We're going to go message box, MSG box. Now we're going to get our computer programming heads on precision. Linguistic precision is so important for computer programmers. Even a single letter, if we don't spell a word correctly, that's going to create a problem. Let me take some water quickly. Big welcome to the people tuning in. You, I think I've said hello already, but good to have you with us. Jakob's with us. Jakob, how you doing? Jakob's one of our members. We're going to talk about our membership program later on. Pramod is with us. Thank you, Pramod. And thank you, Alexander. Good to have you with us as well. So any questions, guys, you can put those questions in the chat. So we're going to say message box, and then we're going to type what we want to appear in this message box. So I'm going to say, take some water. That's because it's the advice I've been given by Pramod, And a few other people in the chat, thank you for your concern, guys. Take some water here. You can write whatever you like. You can write hello. You can write your dog's name. I've got my dog, Luna, just sitting behind here out of shot. But the important thing is we need precision. We've got to start thinking about syntax. We've got to start thinking like a computer programmer. We've got speech marks. We've got speech marks around this text. Without the speech marks, this isn't going to work. If it looks like this, we're now ready to run this routine. So now we can think about how can we trigger a macro in Excel? How can we run one of these little computer programs in Excel? That's an interesting question. Many different ways to do it, some better than others. The first one we're going to look at is just using the VBA editor. Yeah, we can use the VBA editor to run a macro. We don't even have to have Excel. We don't have to have the window visible to run a macro. So what we're going to do is click inside the macro. You can see I've got a cursor flashing there, and we're going to hit play at the top. We've got a very intuitive play button symbol here. I'm going to hit play, and we can see Excel is telling me to take some water. Interesting. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? Is that done? No, it's done. We've got to experiment. We've got to experiment. Experimentation and play is one of the Excel meta skills. If you can experiment, you can make massive progress with your Excel learning. So I'm going to say, hello chat, how are you doing? There we go. So I'm just experimenting by just changing that text. Very simple, but this is play. This is experimentation. Try something else. Try 5 things, 10 things. I don't care, whatever you want to do. Now it's going to get a bit crazy. Now we're going to say, rather than manually typing the text here, we're going to put the text into an object. An object. What on earth does that mean? Well, you already know, because you've been taking notes, you already know that Excel consists of objects which have properties, and those objects are organized into collections. The most common object that you can see in Excel is a cell. And I'm in cell B3 here. So what we want to try and do is whatever we enter in B3, we want that to appear in the message box. How to do that? Big welcome to Fami, who's tuning in over in Tunisia. I bet it's warm over there, Fami. Good to have you with us. Now, how would you go about doing this? What syntax would allow you to do it? And if you didn't know the syntax, here's a question. If you didn't know the syntax, what would you do? Would you just give up? Well, that's another meta skill. What do you do when you don't know? Intelligence is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. Well, the best thing to do probably is to do a Google search. How do I reference a cell in Excel VBA? If you did that, then you might get this answer here. So I'm just going to say range B3 here. And once again, syntax needs to be 100% spot on, but this is the syntax we use to reference a cell in Excel VBA. And now we've got a thing of beauty happening. We've got interaction between the VBA editor and the spreadsheet. And this is where it's so powerful to have this view so you can see the two at the same time, 2 different screens, or one screen divided as I've got it divided here. So I'm going to say, show this text. You can see I've typed that into cell B3. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen now when we run the routine? It's just going to hit the play button here, and we can see show this text is showing. How about that? Is this coming together for you? Let's go ahead and experiment. I'm just going to go back to this, go back to the spreadsheet. So I was accidentally typing in the VBA editor there. What's going to happen now? I can see Chris is going to show there. How about that? Let's take a second to make a deliberate mistake. Let's just see what happens when things go wrong. So I've made a syntax error there. What's going to happen? We're going to get some kind of error message, something like this. Don't worry. Forgive yourself. Get comfortable with error messages in Excel. Another meta skill in Excel is how good are you at interpreting error messages? You know, I always say Excel is a bit like your life partner. And I've got a beautiful life partner of about 10 to 12 years now. Don't get me wrong. I'm the luckiest man in the world. But sometimes what your life partner says is not what they mean. And it's the same with Excel, because Excel's functions, not their functions, Excel's error messages are not always particularly helpful. But over time, you're going to learn how to interpret them. I love you, Sharon. Right, so we can correct this syntax and we can see we're all good again. Cool. So what should you do now? Well, let's just expand this example with some additional syntax quickly. I'm going to put a 0 in here, and then I'm going to just copy this across. Control C and Control V. So I just highlighted this, was holding down the Shift key, using the left arrow to highlight that code, and then I put a 0 in, and then I copied that code here. So here I'm going to say B4. Let's just take a second here. Let's go to the bigger view. Just take a second here to replicate this syntax. And once again, computer programmer heads on, linguistic precision. It's got to be 100% precise. What's going to happen here? Well, just going to hit play. Then you'll notice, can you remember previously we had Microsoft Excel? Microsoft Excel was in the message box. Can you remember that? Now there's nothing at the top of the message box in the message box title. But what we have done is referenced an object here. Referenced a cell in the spreadsheet. This space is where the title of the message box usually is. So what can we do here? Well, in B4, cell B4, which is referenced here, and you can see the power of being able to see the VBA editor and the spreadsheet at the same time. Once more, what's going to happen here? Stop the video. What do you think is going to happen? Have a guess, do some play, do some experimentation, get it wrong, get it wrong, get it wrong again, and then punch the air when you get it right. Let's go. I'm going to hit the play button. So what's going on there? I'm going to hit the play button here, and I can see, we've got the same result. So what's happened here? Well, I'm playing, I'm experimenting, and I've made a mistake, haven't I? Because I've put our title in C3. I should have put it in B4, or I should have put a different syntax here. So I can just change this to C3. Now the entry in C3 should appear when we open this message box here. You can see we've got our title here. And then we've got Chris appearing there. Okay, so it's all about the message box so far. But the main thing here is the interaction. It's the interaction between the spreadsheet and the VBA editor, and you've already learned some syntax. So if you're enjoying this, by the way, why are we doing this today? We're doing it because we're celebrating our member community. We've got a member community based over on the website. It's called Members Monday. And the members, we've had 100 sessions in the members community over the past 3 years. So as part of Members Monday, it's a unique Excel VBA learning community. You get 2 monthly live sessions with me, and you get access to a community, and you're able to get answers to your Excel questions from a helpful group of like-minded individuals. And you get this content navigator. So if you sign up for Members Monday, you get instant access to about 90 1-hour sessions, very similar to this session that we're doing today. And if you're interested, you can just head into the description. All of the information is there. Members Monday really is the best way to make consistent progress with Excel. And we've got a few people here. Jakob, for example, is in our Members Monday community. So do go ahead and check that out. Got some questions coming in. What's the 0 for? So great question here from Xian. I believe that's how you pronounce your name, but apologies if that's inaccurate. So the question is, why 0? Now, 0 is the type of message box. Okay, we're not going to worry too much about this. It's quite an advanced issue. But you know, in Excel, we've got our standard message box, what we call a simple message box. There's also yes/no message boxes. Those message boxes that flash up, you can click yes or no, then the code goes in one of 2 directions, a sense of conditionality. That has a different number. So this number here controls the type of message box. So great question there. Okay, good. So let's move on. Let's go back to our original presentation here. And we've got set up for success. We've set up the VBA editor, got into the developer tab and the screen setup, the importance of having multiple screens or being able to display the VBA editor and Excel at the same time on one screen. Created your first macro. How does it feel? You're a computer programmer now. Okay, fantastic stuff. You've created an Excel VBA macro. Get addicted to it. I hope you've been punching the air. Develop a positive addiction here. It's going to have a massive positive impact. I'm confident on your career. Next thing we're going to do is using the macro recorder. And let's quickly talk about sources of code. Talk about sources. You're thinking Tabasco, ketchup, mayonnaise. Maybe some Branston pickle for people in the UK. I'm talking about sources, sources here, the sources of code. Where does VBA actually come from? Now, the good news perhaps is it's not all organic. Now, organic code is code you write yourself, like we just wrote the message box code. A lot of code isn't organic. A lot of code is recycled. It's recycled from one file to another. Maybe you've gone on Google and you found some code that works. So it's recycled from another source. Then the third source of code is that it's recorded. So it's not all about writing reams of code yourself. Actually, you can adapt existing examples and you can record your own code in Excel. Now in Excel, really is a fantastic feature. The macro recorder, it's a great way to learn Excel VBA. Our task here is going to be get Excel to write a list of 10 numbers. Very simple. Okay. Let's go ahead and do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm just going ahead and writing 10 numbers in Excel. Go ahead and do it yourself. Yeah, just get a feel for what it's like doing that. That's kind of interesting to us because we're going to have to replicate those actions programmatically. Could you get Excel to do that? That would be a challenge, wouldn't it? Using VBA. Well, by this time tomorrow plus half an hour, you should be able to do that. How are we going to get there? We're going to get there by firstly using the macro recorder. Now, what's the macro recorder? It's this icon here. Don't press it yet. What's the macro recorder? It's a brilliant facility in Excel. And the reason I think people should start coding in Excel, and there's lots of people who think you shouldn't, the reason I think you should is basically because of the macro recorder. Such a good facility. What's the idea? We start the macro recorder going, and then we can do something in Excel. Yeah, we can put a value in a cell, we can create a chart, we can do anything in Excel. And the macro recorder is going to record the code for those actions, and we can then subsequently review the code. How about that? Talk about Excel meta skills. We've got one right here. If you can learn to use the macro recorder and then tweak the code and experiment with it and adapt it to your situation, your Excel VBA is going to go through the roof. So without further ado, let's use the macro recorder. There's a couple of things to bear in mind. Firstly, once we start recording a macro, we've got to tell Excel to stop recording at some point. And you'll make this mistake at some point. I'm sure you'll forget to stop it and you end up with, 400 lines of code from the last hour of, your last hour's actions in Excel. So once we hit developer record macro name, what should we call a macro name? Should I call it Luna after my dog? No, macros should be informative. The name of the macro or the subroutine should be informative. So let's say make list, and we know, is this going to work? Is it going to work with a space there? We know names of macros or subroutines, they have to be single words. So we put an underscore in there. That's a nice little programmer touch, isn't it? Put a little underscore in there. Now you have the option of a shortcut key. Actually, don't recommend that. We won't get into that now. But now if we hit OK, let's notice a couple of things. Firstly, in the bottom left-hand corner, we've now got a stop icon. Yeah. It's not particularly visible, is it? But it is there. And then our icon that was previously start recording is now stop recording. That's because we're currently recording code. So we just need to be a little bit more deliberate about our actions now, because everything we do is going to be recorded in the VBA editor. That's the magic of Excel VBA, particularly the macro recorder. What do we want to do? We want to write 10 numbers. So 1 is in. I'm going to type in, click on the cell, type in, click on the cell, type in, click on the cell, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Job done. So you go ahead and do it. You don't have to do 10. You can do 3 or 5 or more if you want to. It doesn't have to be 10. And perhaps we'll adapt it later to make it dynamic. So it could be any number. But now what we've got to do, we've got to remember to stop recording. Otherwise, Excel's going to carry on recording everything we do. Now we hit stop recording. Then we can go back to the VBA editor. So I'm going to go Windows key and left here. And then I've got my beautiful view with the VBA editor and Excel at the same time. Now we've got to go ahead and locate that code. How can we explore what's open using the VB editor? Well, the Project Explorer, we know a little bit about that. So I can see this is my file. Always be conscious of the file you're working in, so you're not putting code in the wrong file and possibly losing that code. I'm going to go to modules, and a module is where code lives. Okay. So we've got module 1 here. Now, usually we put code into modules. The previous code I put into the sheet module. That works fine, but it's better usually to put code into modules here. So what Excel did when I started recording the macro, it went and created this module here. Let's take the time quickly to name the module. So you can see if I click on the module, the property of the module is the module name. We're going to click our code here. So once again, got the underscore. That's not a typical name I'd use for a module, something like functionality or programmer use or navigation. They're typical names I'd use for a module. So once again, an informative name. You're explaining in the name what the code in the module does. And then go ahead and here it is. Here's the code that we just created. How can we identify it? We can identify it because it's called make list. And make list was the name we gave to that macro. How cool is that? Now, when you record a macro, you'll find it in the VBA editor. But what you might find is Excel automatically creates another module. So if you go to insert and then module, you can see I've now got another module here. So make sure you check all of the modules when you're trying to locate your recorded code. This is our recorded code here. Okay. And this is a great opportunity to just begin to interact with Excel VBA code. You know, Excel VBA, a lot of it is quite intuitive. So I can look at the code and understand what the code does. We can see here, okay, active cell.formula, you know, that's not that intuitive, is it? Because we're not putting a formula into the cell, but perhaps you can understand from that we are inputting something into the cell. We're inputting a value of 1 into the cell. And then what about this? Much more intuitive. We're selecting a cell. So we know how to reference cells from earlier in the demonstration. And then we're using a method. This is called a method. So we're doing something in Excel. In this case, we're selecting the cell. That's pretty cool. Now, what are these up here? Well, let's go back to our meta skills briefly. And one of our meta skills was annotation and comments. Now, this is important because you've got to be a translator. I always say doing VBA programming, you're doing translation, just like you're translating from French to English or something like that. In a previous life, I used to translate from Japanese to English, believe it or not. But we've got to guide the user through the code in English or in your native language. Now, if you go into the VBA editor and just type an inverted comma and then type anything you like, I'm going to say comment here. You can see this is automatically green and it's what we call commented out. It's commented out. It has the inverted comma there. Excel will ignore this. Excel is going to ignore this when the code is executed. So this is a great opportunity for us to write something informative. So for example, here I've put inverted comma. Then I'm going to say input number to cell. Okay, there we go. So we're now using comments, using annotations. Let's see who's checking in. Keshav, how you doing? Big welcome to you. Kagate, sorry about the pronunciation. Thank you for everything. Thank you very much, my friend. And Lee's here as well. Lee, how are you doing? Good to see you. Lee is one of our members, Monday members. A big welcome to Lee. Okay, so we've got our comments in, and we just want to be aware of comments and annotations. They help us to understand the code, but these annotations, we don't really need. The macro recorder will by default create some annotations at the top of the code that we don't necessarily need. So we can just go ahead and delete those, and I'm going to get a bit geeky here. I'm going to select all the code and then hit Shift and Tab. That's going to de-indent it. I think that's the word, because indentation is important in computer programming. We might touch on that tomorrow. We don't want any indentation here. Okay. So what's this code doing? Well, in order to understand that, we've got to get good at debugging. Another one of our Excel meta skills here, learning to debug. Let's go through some of Excel's debugging aims and understand debugging aids and just understand how important they are. Good. So you can see I've cleaned out this area in the spreadsheet. So just select it and then hit delete on the keyboard. Now we're going to rerun the code. Now you could say, Chris, that's easy. I know how to do that. I can just click in and then hit play at the top, and you can see what's happened here. You can see that list appearing. Now that's cool. So I can just click in and play at the top. So that's one way to do debugging. Yeah, you can go to the VBA editor, play the routine, and see what happens in Excel. That's one way of doing it. That is going to be pretty useful, but we can do even better than that. Rather than playing all the code, could we step through? Could we step through the code one step at a time and then see in Excel step by step what's happening in the VBA editor? How cool would that be? That would give us a much deeper understanding. How do we do that? Well, we've got our debugging tools here. So we can go to debug and then step into, we've got the F8 shortcut on the Windows PC. So we've got F8 there. What we're going to see is Excel highlights a line of code. So Excel is saying it's going to execute the code line by line and tell us where it's got to so far with that code execution. So we haven't executed any lines of code yet. Excel is highlighting the start of the routine. Seems to make sense. And then take a second to note, also Excel's in break mode here, break mode. So Excel won't run any code at the moment because Excel's in break mode. It's like having the bonnet or the hood up on your car. The Americans out there, the hood up on your car, you're doing some repairs. You're not going to drive off with your bonnet up. I'm certainly not recommending that. Okay. So what we're going to go is just go to debug and then step into, and then you can just click step into. Debug, step into, then just watch what's happening here. So we're learning, we're experimenting, we're playing. I'm just going to hit debug and let's see what happens. Something's happening. Something is definitely happening here. Debug, step into. Now that gets a bit annoying after a while. So use the keyboard shortcut. So I can use the F8 key on the Windows PC. If you're on Mac, just Google Excel VBA shortcut, debug, step into, something like that. You'll be able to find the equivalent shortcut for Mac. I can just hit F8 now. What we're seeing is a thing of beauty, an Excel meta skill in action, debugging in action. If you can debug, you can do anything with Excel VBA. I firmly believe that. So I'm hitting the F8 key, working through the routine. And this is a great way for me to understand code. Now, if a line of code is highlighted, it means this line of code is the next to run. So if it's highlighted, it's not been executed yet. So I can see, okay, range B11 select. What's going to happen when that line of code is executed? How cool is that? So I'm watching cell B11 here. Something's going to happen. It's been selected. And then active cell.formula R1C1 equals 7. That's going to put 7 into the cell. Then what's going to happen next? Range B12.select. So I'm keeping my eye on B12. That cell is selected. Okay, just hitting the F8 key. That's the power of stepping into or stepping through code. Let's look at one more debugging aid now, which is putting a breakpoint into the code, putting a breakpoint. So you can say to Excel, run the code to here and then stop and just allow me to understand what the situation is. Now I did that by clicking the left mouse button in this little margin. So the left margin in the coding window, you can put as many breakpoints as you want. If you click on the breakpoint again, it's going to make it disappear. So stop the video. Here's a question for you, experimentation and play. If I hit play now, what's going to happen with this routine? If I hit play now, what will I see on the screen if I hit play? So I'm going to go in, I'm going to hit play, and we can see we've only got to 5. Why has it stopped at 5? Because we've got to this point in the code and Excel has stopped. And we're in break mode because we've got a yellow line highlighted and it says break mode at the top. So from here, I can then start stepping through the code and I can see our list being created. Pretty cool. Okay. But this isn't too efficient, is it? Now, the truth is a computer programmer would never do coding like this. Why not? Because you've got a lot of repetition. We're talking about meta skills. We're talking about good habits and good things to do. Also look out for those bad habits. One bad habit we want to look out for in Excel VBA programming is repetition or duplication. Repetition or duplication. The whole point of having a computer is that it can do work for us. It can repeat instructions. We don't need to repeat very similar instructions. We can actually get Excel to do these things for us using Excel and Excel VBA. That's what we're going to do. We're going to take this routine, create a list of 10 numbers. We're going to reduce it maybe to 3 or 4 lines of code, 3 or 4 lines of code. And there's more. Those 3 or 4 lines of code, they could create 10 numbers, 10,000 numbers, 100,000 numbers. That's how powerful this next construct is going to be. Now, what we're going to do, coming towards the end of this session now, the techniques we're going to look at very quickly, interacting with cells, we've been talking about variables, loops, and conditional statements. I'm going to put position control here as well. Variable, loops, conditional statements, position control. Now we're coming to the end of the session. There's a special way I do this. I'm going to throw it all at you. You're not going to understand it. Okay? You're not going to understand it. Yeah? Get comfortable with that. Okay? This is how we do stuff at Tiger. Sometimes we're just going to jump in at the deep end. We're going to try to swim. We're going to be okay, but it's going to feel very challenging, a little bit dangerous maybe. This is a great way to make quick progress with your Excel learning. So what I'm going to do is create a new routine, and let's call it make list short routine. Now, what I recommend you do is you just type along with me here. Yeah, I'm not going to try to explain everything as we go. I'll make some kind of short explanatory notes maybe as we go. Not going to try to explain everything. We're going to untangle everything tomorrow in our next session. So firstly, we're going to declare, and here I go, I'm going to try to explain everything, aren't I? We're going to declare a variable here. So dim counter as integer. So a variable is one of the key techniques we learn. What's a variable? It's one of those crazy computer programming words. I've got no idea. Very simple. A variable, it's very much like a cell, really. It's just a place to store information. A place to store information. Declare a variable here. It's like we might put information in a cell. We can store information in a variable. The difference is we can't see a variable. A variable just exists in the computer's memory. We can't see it unless we tell Excel VBA to show it to us in some way. And we use this specific formulation, just like we say sub and then the name of the routine. We say dim and then the name of the variable. We should choose an informative name. This variable is going to count for us. That's why we call it counter. And then we say the type of variable. This type of variable, what kind of information will it hold? It will hold whole numbers. So it's an integer variable. Then we're going to introduce the concept of a loop. I'm going to go ahead and just write the syntax. 1 to 10, and then next counter. Okay. So what on earth is a loop? Well, remember, we're trying to avoid repeated instructions here. What have we got a lot of here? If we critique the code, we could say, yeah, it might work. We've got a lot of repeated instructions. What does a loop do? A loop in Excel, VBA, and in computer programming more generally allows us to repeat an instruction any number of times. Repeat an instruction any number of times. How about that? What a mind-blowingly powerful idea. It doesn't just make things a bit quicker. It's like having a spaceship. It's like riding around on a bicycle every day, and then suddenly you're in a spaceship and you can go to a different galaxy. It's game-changing. It's game-changing, this stuff. Now, there's 3 different formulations for loops in Excel VBA. Do you need to know all of them? No, but it's great to know one of them. I recommend you learn what we call a for next loop first. Now, what's the syntax quickly? Well, we say for, and then we say next. I wasn't getting emotional about loops there. It's just my cough, unfortunately. For and then next, and then we put the code into the loop. Now, whatever's in here is going to be repeated. How many times is it going to be repeated? Well, that's the role of the variable. The variable controls the number of times we're going to iterate through this loop. How about that? That's why we had to declare a variable. We're saying to Excel, this little space I've created in your memory, I want you to use it to store a number from 1 to 10. And then I want you to increase that number by 1 each time we go through the loop. This is the basic idea of loops. Now, we're not going to get into a detailed explanation. This is the basic idea, but hopefully I'm beginning to like that file. You're thinking, my goodness, those manual tasks I've been doing in Excel for 5 years. It's just a repeated instruction. Could I automate that with loops? You probably could. This is certainly going to move you in the right direction. Then what do we want to do? We want to create our list of numbers. So we want to interact with a range, don't we? We know how to do that already. So I'm going to say range, I'm going to say C4 here. C4.value equals, I'm going to say equals counter. What on earth is this all about? Hey, I told you, we're jumping in at the deep end. We're not scared. It's good to feel challenged. Yeah. And it's good to feel like you're trying to work things out. You're developing those meta skills when you feel like that. But we're comfortable. Yeah. We're comfortable with this syntax. Okay. If we're not comfortable with it, let's go ahead and run it now. So I'm going to hit the F8 key, step through this code. I've got to this line of code. Keep your eye on C4. What's going to happen? Number 1 appears in C4. So we're comfortable with that formulation, putting a static value into a cell. So why is it a big deal? Don't worry. I'm just messing. It is a big deal. Yeah, it is a big deal. What's going to happen here? Anybody who's live with us in the chat, big welcome to Henrik tuning in. Long-time support of the channel. How are you doing, Henrik? Can anybody tell me in the chat now, what's going to happen when we step through this code? I'm not going to run this code. I'm going to step through it step by step. Can anybody understand what's going to happen there? Let's go ahead and give it a go. So once again, you can go to debug and step into, I've got my setup, VBA on one side, Excel on the other. Debug, step into here. Now I've got a line of code highlighted. I'm in break mode. It says break at the top of the VBA editor. Going to hit the F8 key on the Windows PC. And we're going to iterate through this routine. Let's just see what happens. I'm going to hit the F8 key. Keep an eye, guys, on cell C4. Explosive. Keep an eye on cell C4. And we've got Pavlos coming in with a great idea here. C4 will take values from 1 to 10. Very close. In fact, could be 100% accurate there, Pavlos. That's a great effort. Takes a lot of guts, doesn't it? To put your hand up and make a contribution. I've got a lot of respect for that. So thank you for your contributions in the chat today, guys. Let's hit the F8 key and you can see 1 has appeared. Now, where's this line going to go next? Is it just going to go to the bottom of the routine? Because we know that's how code works. It just goes from one line to the next. It's not. This is the power of loops, because we're going to go back to the top of the loop. And then we're going to come down again. And then we're going to go come down again and again and again. When does it stop? It stops, because we specified that at the top, when counter equals 10. So I'm just hovering over counter in the VBA editor. This is another nice debugging technique. You can hover over a variable to externalize the value of that variable. In the F8 key, counter now equals 8. Counter now equals 9. Counter now equals 10. But we're now going to exit the loop because we've satisfied the exit condition. Counter equals 10. You can see we now go to the end of the routine. How about that? Final thing today, and don't worry, we're going to go more into this tomorrow. Final thing. Yeah, it's quite nice, isn't it? Just to be able to put all the numbers in a cell if you step through it. But if we run this routine, you can see we can't see what's happening. Actually, Excel's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but we can't see that, with the naked eye here. So we want to create that list. Stop the video. Write out this syntax very carefully. What's going to happen when I hit play here? Let's go ahead. Your mind might be blown by that. We're going to go through that tomorrow. And guys, thanks so much for watching today. This is part 1 of your 2-hour Excel VBA course. And if you like these sessions, I'd love to have you in our Members Monday community. The reason we're doing this course is we're celebrating 100 sessions we've had in our Members Monday community. We're going 3 years now. You get 2 live sessions with me. We get to interact in the chat, talk about Excel problems, what you're trying to do in Excel. We've got a great community, a great forum, a special page dedicated to Members Monday members. You can go and get your questions answered on Excel. Then we have our amazing content navigator file. So every live session we record and I go through personally and index the content so you can find exactly what you need. The details are in the description below this video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I can't wait to see you tomorrow for part 2.